we're back now with Christian Picciolini, who escaped a life of racial hatred and violence in the 90s. When Christian was still involved with the skinheads, one of the many people he came in contact with was this young woman. This is Shannon Martinez. She says by the age of 16, she was a runaway, a skinhead, and filled with angry, hate-filled ideas. But Shannon says with love and compassion from others, she too turned her life around, and she now works with Christian to stop young people from choosing a life of hate. Even though these two work together, she and Christian have actually not seen each other in 25 years, since both were heavily into racist ideology. But they see each other now. Please welcome Shannon Martinez. Thank you. Thanks for having me. So I just want to make clear, they both now work to stop this ideology and are, it's scary, I'm sure, to come on national television and talk about having been a skinhead. But talk about how you got recruited, Shannon. How did you get pulled into it?
For me, my recruitment began, I had been a part of the punk movement, and I'd started going to shows, and I'd always felt sort of like the black sheep in my family. So I was already really struggling with ideas of belonging and stuff. And then a few weeks shy of my 15th birthday, I went to a party, and I had lied about where I was going, and I had been drinking, and I was sexually assaulted by two men, and that was how I had lost my virginity. I knew on some level that I couldn't tell my parents that I had been raped because they would be more mad that I had lied about where I was going and that I had been drinking than that I had just been sexually assaulted. Being 14 years old, I just shoved all of that trauma down. And for a few months I was okay, but that unprocessed trauma came out as just rage, just all-encompassing rage that I didn't understand. And so as a 15-year-old young woman, I was just so angry. And the angriest people that I knew were the skinheads. And so I identified with their rage and their anger, but I also identified with how they stuck together if there were fights at punk shows. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of slid in sideways, which is one of the very common modalities for how people end up in radical ideologies, is they kind of come in sideways, identifying the trauma that they have felt with the trauma and the violence that they see in others.
Is it true that I read that you participated in an attack on a gay nightclub?
Yes.
What happened there?
I was living in Houston, Texas at the time, and the way that extremism works is that you escalate in order to continue to be able to hold this ideology that requires you to dehumanize people. You have to continually amp up the stakes, which is why it's dangerous, because it almost inevitably ends in violence. And we were just driving around looking for trouble and looking to do violence, and somebody had a canister of tear gas, and we drove to this nightclub and ran and threw it in, and then as people escaped from it in the back alleyway, we just started fighting people.
How did you go from that person, skinhead, who's attacking gay men and lesbian women, to this person today? How did you get out?
The main vehicle for me disengaging was I was taken in by a boyfriend's mom, and she knew what I was, but she took me in anyway and let me live with her and her 3 younger sons. He was finishing up military training and wasn't there. And instead of directly confronting me about what I believed, and I had this gruff exterior, I was so angry still, she just took me in. She was like, you have to help around the house, you gotta try to look for a job, but they let me do like regular people stuff. I took the kids to Cub Scouts, we threw the football in the backyard, we went fishing and camping, and then she actually helped me dream dreams for myself that I had forgotten how to dream. She was like, oh, remember, like, don't you wanna go to college? And there was no internet, so she actually physically drove me to the library to look up the address for the school that I was interested in.
It was like you getting the break at IBM,
yeah.
like someone taking a chance on you.
Yeah.
And believing that you could be better than you were.
Yeah.
I mean,
They saw something inside of us that we didn't even see ourselves.
So to those out there who are very worried about this, who are worried about the fact that we have what appears to be an openly racist man running for Congress right now, what is your message? What do they need to know, Chris?
Well, I think adults have a responsibility. I think we've let down our young people to a large degree. We need to be better guides, but we also need to listen, I think, more than we speak. Young people want to be heard. They don't necessarily want to be talked to. And while they may not have the maturity that we have, they're very passionate. And we need to do better about supporting those passions at a young age so that they don't feel disenfranchised or disenchanted and look for acceptance in negative ways.
Do you feel like this movement is in some way emboldened right now?
I think absolutely it's emboldened. And I also think at the same time that there's a crisis for so many young people really struggling beyond just normal teenage and young adults struggling with the sense of identity and belonging and purpose, that there's a lot of challenges that they're facing an economy where they're not going to necessarily do better than their parents. They're going to go into their adulthood with a lot of educational debt and an education that isn't super relevant to the workforce that's out there. And they see those things, and there's a lot of despair. So that's what we try to do, is to be, to use the grim, awful reality and the worst things that we've ever done to be this beacon of light and hope and say, like, you can be redeemed, like you can transform your life from the worst of the worst and fill it with the best things, with love and compassion and
you have
empathy.
credibility with the very people who were trying to pull out of that ideology.
Yes.
You can speak about it in a way that they understand. Thank you both for telling your stories.
Thank you, Megyn.
Thank you for having us.
Here. Again, Christian's book is called White American Youth: My Descent into America's Most Violent Hate Movement and How I Got Out. And for more on his work fighting hate, you can go to today.com/Megyn Today.
Hello, Today fans. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking that button down there and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives.